Hello and welcome to While You're at the Library. We're so glad to join you in your living room and have you join us in our sitting room here. And we're going to have so many fun books to talk about and other things too. I'm Catherine Poulter, the children's librarian, and
I'm John, and I work in reference.
very good.
I'm Becky. I'm the circulation lead librarian.
I'm Trent. I am a reference specialist as well.
So it's really great to have you here and for us to all be together. And I know that I have some good books I want to talk about, but let's start with you, Trent.
Okay. Well, let's start with a really happy note. This is a book called In Full Flight, A Story of Africa and Atonement by John Heminway, not Hemingway, Heminway. This is a book about a French doctor named Anne Sperry. I think I might be saying her name wrong, but S-P-O-E-R-R-Y. And this doctor was a survivor of World War II concentration camps. And after the Second World War, she spent the majority of the remainder of her life in Kenya, treating Africans. She gained a big reputation for selflessness and her tireless dedication and devotion as a doctor to the people of Kenya. And for a long time, nobody really knew the story of what drove her to Kenya, what drove her to be this, angel of mercy doctor to so many people. But John Heminway, who was an admirer of hers, he investigated her life and found that in her time in the Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany, that she had become one of the camp doctors.
Ooh.
And that she was involved in a lot of very questionable things. And so this book is an interesting exploration not only of some World War II history, but also of, it explores the morality of the things that went on and how some people coped, how they tried to survive, and then, what they did in the aftermath and the choices that they made then.
That's why it's called Atonement?
Yes, A Story of Africa and Atonement, In Full Flight. And as I've been reading through this, I mean, it's been a fascinating book to read, heartbreaking in a lot of ways. I think that any time that we are confronted with tyranny, it is an interesting chance for us to examine who we really are. That definitely happened to, Dr. Sperry in this book.
So she capitulated at first?
Yes. Apparently there was a prisoner in the camp that influenced her quite a bit, and she just didn't have the strength to stand up to this. And a lot of times in a German concentration camp, prisoners were made leaders of blocks of other prisoners, and this particular prisoner was horrifically amoral, but for whatever reason Dr. Sperry was enthralled to her, and so pretty much did whatever this person told her to do, according to all the investigation that the author did. And then she spent the rest of her life trying to make up for the things that she'd done in this concentration camp.
Wow.
Yeah, so like I said, not necessarily the most uplifting of books, but definitely an interesting examination into what is possible with human beings and, things that we should be aware of as we continue to move forward, never assuming that liberty is ours.
That's right. And if there is tyranny, what to do?
And yes, exactly. If there is tyranny, what to do? You might want to ask yourself the question before you're confronted with the situation.
Yes.
If I was in this situation, what would I do? What would I really do? So, cautionary tale and a moral exploration, all kinds of different things. Books like this aren't necessarily the easiest reads, but in some ways I think they're very worthwhile reads. They make us confront our own humanity. So, In Full Flight by John Heminway. That's really all I have to say about this book, but I think it's a worthwhile book, and I think that people should come and read this book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Becky, I see that you have a big stack. Choose one.
Actually, I'm
tell
going to
us.
choose the whole
The
stack.
whole stack. Okay.
I've got 10 books here, and I want you to figure out what they all have in common. Okay? So we've got To Kill a Mockingbird, Charlotte's Web,
I can guess the theme in one word.
One word. What's your one word?
Classic.
Ooh, that might be it. The Great Gatsby. The Catcher in the Rye.
Band.
Ooh, that's another really good word. Foundation.
Ooh.
I remember.
Okay,
those.
this is where I throw you the curveball. The Alchemist. The Handmaid's Tale. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
Movie?
Ooh, you're coming up with really good words, Catherine.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 more. The Giver and The Hunger Games.
Do they all have to be one-word answers?
No.
I think these are all books that have been listed on people's reading lists in the 50-book summer challenge or whatever it was.
Several of them are, yes. They're actually on another
Good.
list.
Have
Anyone,
any of us
anyone?
said it?
No.
Okay. What
Not
could
yet.
it be?
PBS is doing an awesome challenge called the Great American Read.
Ooh.
And they have gathered 100 popular titles. And they have gone around different ways to gather all these titles. So you've got classics, you've got things that are purchased a lot.
Things that were made
are-
into movies?
Things that have been made into movies.
Things that are banned?
Things that have been challenged, things that you read for school. Anyways, 100 titles. And they want America to vote. So read, vote, share. And so you read, then you get online, you place your vote. You can get on social media and do a hashtag with part of the title, which this tells you what the hashtags are so you get the right one going. And at the end of the year, they are going to declare the winner.
Wow.
So they do have a program going on that goes through and talks about each of the books, but there's just such a wide variety. So at first you think, oh, a lot of these are classics, and then you're like, wait, a lot of these are movies. So there's other great ones on here. Anne of Green Gables, Beloved, Dune, Flowers in the Attic.
Is Moby Dick on the list?
Let me see if Moby Dick is on the list. Yes, he is.
Oh, good.
Oh, good.
Good old whale. Moby Dick, The Stand, The Shack, Rebecca, Pillars of the Earth,
Wow.
Wuthering Heights, Wheel of Time. So many good ones on here. Some that I don't think are so great are also on here, but that's why they want to know, what does America think the #1 book is?
Wow.
So this is PBS putting it all together. However, we have put together a display at the library, and you can check out our display. It will be up through the month of August.
Nice.
So lots and lots of books.
That's
100 of
exciting.
them. So, and it's fun to look through the list and say, oh, I've read
This, and
36 of these off the bat. So
Very
add that to
nice.
your reading challenge, summer reading, 50/50 book quest, whatever. These are books America thinks should be on the great list.
that. Thank you. That was really good. John, what do you have for us?
Well, I brought in a lot of books that were kind of oriented towards travel and books that were given to us, but not, some of them were. So the first one I think I've got here that I thought was interesting was Adrift in Caledonia. This is a book about hitchhiking, only the hitchhiking is done on boats,
Ooh, from boat to boat.
from boat to boat.
Wow.
And he's got a lot of photos of things. He's got the Falkirk wheel, which is a famous kind of a substitute for locks that's in Scotland. And then there's he's got barges that he shows that he hitchhiked on canals in Scotland. And this is all through Scotland. And he even managed to get on a yellow submarine.
Did he pay for these things?
No, he just hitchhiked. So there he is on a yellow submarine. And he actually got a tour of a Trident submarine.
Oh, cool.
And
I'm
so
pressing it.
I just thought it was like really it looked really interesting, like fun.
Oh,
like a
yeah,
fun
that would be
story.
cool.
Yeah.
And who is he?
This is Nick Thorpe.
Nick Thorpe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the book is called Adrift in Caledonia.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's my first one. And then there's another one, also on Scotland, by Neil Asherson, and it's called Stone Voices, The Search for Scotland.
Ooh.
And I found a little thing in here that I wanted to read. Okay. It said, Araconan was a Bale, an ancient nuclear community whose form may well have evolved from settlement patterns in the Iron Age. Achdar in southwest is a crofting township, a relatively modern invention. Crofting, as it is known today, originated as a system divided by landlords and improvers in the late 18th century, which spread all over the highlands and islands in the ensuing 100 years. Crofting began as the clan system fell apart, and as the traditional leaders of Gaelic society entered the expensive, cash-driven economy of the rest of Britain. Their search for new sources of revenue began with two commodities, kelp and sheep.
I was thinking Pete, maybe.
Well,
Clearing the population from their subsistence patch farming in the hills and resettling them along the shore served two purposes. It freed huge inland tracts for large-scale sheep grazing, and it provided the landlords with a local labor force to carry out the heavy work of harvesting, burning, and processing the kelp. There was another crucial point to the introduction of crofting, and it was to cause much of the suffering, destitution, and conflict of the 19th century. Crofting was designed to reduce or destroy the independence of the tenantry.
Ooh.
The new crofts, usually laid out on acid, stony soil, were seldom productive enough to feed a family, even with the widespread introduction of the potato to replace grain crops. In order to survive, men and women were obliged to take up inshore fishing or to work for wages at the kelp or as estate laborers. Most of them did all three.
Wow.
So,
Interesting.
yeah, so he's got a lot of historical tidbits in here like that.
What did they use kelp for?
They used it to make soap, among other things.
Because I didn't ever taste any kelp.
Yeah, they would use it to fertilize fields, and they also burnt it and used the ash for soap making.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so
Well, that is an interesting
yeah,
book.
so 2 books on Scotland.
Great.
Traveling.
Good. Thank you. Well, I brought with me one of our speedy reader kits. This happens to be one of my favorites. It's the Exile series. There's 3 books in this series: The Exiles at Home, and Exiles in Love. And the cool thing about speedy reader kits is it's all the books in a series in one bag, and they check out for six weeks. So if you're really a speedy reader and you want to read all the books and you don't want to wait for the 3rd one to come in and you have the 4th one already and you're just wanting to read it and you have to wait and wait and wait, here you can check them all out at once. So we have about 30 different kits at the moment, and we're adding more as time goes by. And when I went to go choose one to bring, there were only 5 to choose from because they're all checked out. So this is good. So come and choose a series. And if you haven't ever heard of, say, The Exiles or some other book series, well, take it anyway, because then you have a whole series you could read at once, and it's really good. So that is what I brought to share, the Speedy Reader Kits. And those are on the back by the Story Kits, and I really like them. So.
do we still have those nifty book bags for sale? Because those are pretty cool.
Oh, we do. They
Good.
are really cool, aren't they? And yes, we do have some.
Yeah, there's one with a dinosaur on it.
Mm.
Love it.
I remember when those
Yes.
first arrived, I was actually present when they opened the boxes and the squeals of delight that the
Yeah,
dinosaurs, that
dinosaurs,
was,
yeah.
That's really good. Well, Trent, now we're back around to you.
We are back around to me. My next selection is a little more uplifting than the last one, even though the title is Lament from a Peeress. This book by Christopher C. King is about the author's discovery and investigation into one of the oldest surviving folk musics on the planet.
Oh, cool.
In fact, it is said that, and I'm going to get the name wrong, I'm just going to say music from Epirus, the folk music from Epirus, and I'll have to say that because there's another word that I can't remember, predates like Homer, the Greek author.
Wow.
Homer, like we're talking thousands and thousands of years old. He first heard this music when he was in Istanbul,
Uh-huh.
and it was music that had been recorded on these 78s. You know, once upon a time, people, when recording technology was still pretty new, they would go around with, you know,
Microphones.
recording apparatuses and record just music that was around. And
Alan
so,
Lomax.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of musicologists that were active in the early part of the 20th century, just trying to record the music that existed in their time. And so, you know, some of this music got laid down on shellac, and Christopher King, who is a Grammy-winning producer, musicologist, and prominent 78 RPM record collector. He's a man after my own heart. He discovered this music and started investigating it. And this book is not only about the music itself and the people that still pass this music down from generation to generation, but it also starts to explore the purpose of music. You know, he postulates in this book that when you're able to get to a music that is this ancient, you know, we might begin to get a glimpse as to what function music initially served humankind. You know, a lot of times these days, music is deemed, you know, sheerly for entertainment value, and therefore it's superfluous. You know, we see this a lot in public school systems where music programs are cut. You know, music is superfluous. But he argues that in examining this folk music, that actually music in this community served a purpose of healing, like it was an actual tool used for healing, not only of the body, but also of the soul, of the psyche, that it was essential, it was deemed essential to existence, as essential as food and water and sleep. And so I think this is a fascinating archaeological, it's almost like Indiana Jones of the folk music. It's yeah.
Does it have a CD with it?
It does not have a CD. However, in my investigation of this book, I went onto YouTube and I put in folk music, Epirus, and came up with some lovely examples. And indeed, the music is just as haunting as Mr. King hints that it is. It's a very interesting music to listen to and very primal.
And ancient.
Ancient music.
Even you think that maybe some of the tunes are the same as the ancient.
Well, their roots
times.
definitely go back predating Greek civilization.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, this, and I should probably also say that this music it was fostered and cultured by the Roma people that lived in between northern Greece and Albania,
Okay.
and that's where this music still exists.
Okay.
So,
I wonder about native music from the Americas. How does that date?
well, it's hard to say because of how much cultural destruction went on as they were driven out of their lands, and how much it was infected by Western music. But I mean, you know, there's music studies that have gone into Native American music,
Yeah.
and it's
Or Australian.
oh, Aboriginal music.
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, you know, you listen to an Aboriginal planet
Didgeridoos and
didgeridoo,
stuff, yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Watch them do that circular breathing. That's pretty interesting to watch. Tried it once. I wasn't successful.
That's because you just tried it once.
Well, that's yes, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you. I
yeah.
want to read that.
The Men from Epirus.
Wow, cool.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the depressing book. Okay, so when you think of a ship sinking, what immediately comes to mind?
Titanic.
Titanic, right? What if I told you that there is a ship in our history that's 6 times worse than the Titanic, but not very many people know about it?
Oh, that would be sad.
It's very sad.
Icy waters.
Very icy waters. So this book caught my eye, Salt to the Sea, and it is on a young reader's choice list. So it's written for young adults, and it is a historical fiction. However, the author has done her homework. She follows 4 main characters through the story, and they are refugees. There are Germans.
Was it during the Second World War?
It is.
I remember
World War II, and Germany is at its end, and Hitler has finally given permission for Germans to evacuate. And Operation Hannibal is in place. Now, Operation Hannibal had several ships involved, and they were taking as many people away from Germany as possible. Now, the one ship that we're going to focus on for this story is the William Gustave. And this was a big, beautiful ocean liner. And it was designed to hold 2,000 people. And when World War II started, Hitler had this ocean liner at first as a show off the greatness of his power. Then it turned into a hospital on the water, and it was for just wounded soldiers. But then when Operation Hannibal was put into place, it was for everybody.
Refugees.
Those who have been wounded, those who are evacuating, refugees. One of the characters that we're following in the book is from East Persia. And there's a young boy who is a German soldier, I can't speak, who is hiding part of a treasure in his pack. And so he's having to be very secretive because he's not in uniform, and so he has to be kind of, because he's like undercover. So he's joined up with a young girl who is 9 months pregnant, due any time. Also a nurse who is trying to take care of a bunch of refugees. And so they all kind of band together. They cross icy waters together, sometimes successful, sometimes not, all trying to get to this port at the Baltic Sea. And they do get on this amazing ship, and they are just so lucky that they have gotten onto this ship. However, as it's crossing the sea, which this is supposed to be like a 48-hour voyage, it gets hit by 3 torpedoes from the Russians. And needless to say, it sinks. There were 10,000 people aboard.
Instead of 2,000?
Instead of 2,000. They took out everything they could possibly take out. Furniture, anything that was not needed, and they crammed people in there. One of the things it talks about is it had this big swimming pool in the bottom, and that swimming pool was emptied, and it was just filled with bedding, and it was actually a bunch of women that were down there in the pool. Anyways, it just really caught my attention because I had never heard of this story before, and it's horrible. But
did the Russians know what they were bombing?
They did. And if you actually go into Russia, there is a statue for the captain that sent off the, I was going to look up his name. I can't remember his name.
Torpedoes?
Sent off the torpedoes.
I really didn't believe him.
He is considered a hero because they found it as a turn of the war kind of event. Anyway, so they have a statue
to kill
for him.
women and children and babies?
All of them, but it was an act of war, so it's looked at differently. Anyways, because I hadn't heard anything about this ship before, I put in a suggestion card for our library to get a book because I wanted to know more about the William Gustave. And so this is Death in the Baltic, which is the very cold waters, so it didn't matter whether they had life jackets or not. If they got wet, they most likely did not survive. And in Salt to the Sea, it talks about people who were, they all felt safe because they all had life jackets. Unlike the Titanic, where they didn't even have the life preserves that they needed, These guys did, but it was just too cold. And so for months and months, they had bodies coming up onto the shores. And you don't hear anything about this. And so I wanted to know more. And so our library got this book. I have not read the whole thing, but it follows people who actually survived this tragedy. And one of the men that it talks about, he was just a little boy. And he tells you everything he went through, what he saw, what it was like being in the lifeboat. And as people died, they just let them go over because they didn't want them the extra weight in their boat. And it took a while for rescues to come through. So, horrible thing in our history, not very many people know about, and just now more and more information is coming about, and they've had people starting to scuba dive down and investigate it. Because of where it was in the borders, it wasn't able to be investigated a lot until governments would let people in there. So this book does include some pictures, letters, flyers, posters. The idea was great to have all these people aboard, but they just didn't make it to their destination. Anyways, I know, horrible story, but it was just fascinating to read about history I didn't know.
You mentioned that it follows specific people. Do both of those books follow like the stories of specific people through their experiences like that?
It does.
That's a lot like Hiroshima. Have you ever read that book?
No, but I've heard about it.
It's the same thing.
John Hersey.
It's John Hersey. Yeah, it's a thin little book, but it follows several people who were residents of Hiroshima when the bomb was dropped, and follows them through, what the moments were leading up to that moment, and then what their life was like for weeks and months afterwards. This sounds a lot the same, where it takes an event and then tells it through their eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really liked Salt to the Sea. I did the ebook, and so I don't know if the hardback has it, but it has copies of some of her interviews that she had. If people allowed her to publish their name, then she did. Some people just wanted to not have their name attached to it, though, because it is such an emotional thing to have gone through. But they agree that it is important for people to know about this. So they wanted their story out there. So although the specific characters she has are not
True people?
True people, they are based on the stories that she heard. Okay. Wow. So like the lady who is 9 months pregnant, we do know that there was a baby that survived.
A brand new baby.
A brand new baby. Wow. And so perhaps it was, the little one that was born just as it was taking off. So amazing story. Lots of courage in both books. You just see so much courage and the way people band together. In Salt to the Sea, a lot of the story is the getting to the boat. And the boat is just like the last, I want to say, third of the book. But the getting there, everything they put forth to get to this hope of being free, and that constant worry that the Russians are coming. They know they're really close, and they'll do anything to get onto this boat. So,
thank you. That's impressive.
Me?
Talk to us.
Okay. The next book I'm going to talk about is God Save Texas by Lawrence Wright. He wrote The Looming Tower, which was an account of the 9/11 disaster. And, in that book he talked about the people who were involved in plotting it and just, the whole thing. And then he also did a really good book on Scientology, the history of Scientology, that was really good. But in this one, he's a Texas native, and it's kind of a travelogue about his home state. And it's illustrated with drawings, which is kind of nice. So a little bit different.
That's interesting. Tents and a city in the background.
Yeah. So tents hit. Yeah. It's like I was just reading about Los Angeles having problems with tent encampments catching on fire and burning. I thought that was kind of interesting. But so anyway, there's I picked out a little portion of this to read out
good.
loud too. It says the title of the chapter is "Turn the Radio On," and he says, "One can drive across Texas and be in two different states at the same time. AM Texas and FM Texas. FM Texas is the silky voice of city dwellers in the kingdom of NPR. It is progressive, blue, reasonable, secular, and smug, almost like California. AM Texas speaks to the suburbs and the rural areas, Trumpland. It's endless bluster and endless ads. Paranoia and piety are the main items on the menu. Alex Jones is Texas's main contribution to this indignant conversation. In addition to his program, The Alex Jones Show, he runs an influential website, Infowars.com, a progenitor of the fake news phenomenon. Rolling Stone called Jones the most paranoid man in America. In his hyperbolic imagination, the U.S. government has been behind nearly every disaster imaginable, including 9/11, an inside job, the Oklahoma City bombing, a false flag operation, and the Sandy Hook massacre, a giant hoax.
No.
Oh yeah.
As for Hillary Clinton, one of the most powerful criminal kingpins in history, Jones alleges that she has personally murdered and chopped up children.
No.
I met Jones in 2009 when filmmaker Richard Linklater invited me to a screening of American Prince, a documentary by Tommy Pallotta. Rick has always been drawn to alternative ways of thinking, like an anthropologist studying vision quests among Plains Indians. He cast Jones as a street corner prophet with a bullhorn in A Scanner Darkly, a rotoscoped realization of Philip K. Dick's dystopian novel. Jones played a similar role in a previous Linklater film, Waking Life. I had only a dim idea who Jones was at the time. He had grown up in a suburb outside Dallas and moved to Austin. His defining moment was the siege by the U.S. government of the Branch Davidian compound in Waco in 1993. After that, he became an apostle of the extreme libertarian anti-government movement. Rick impishly introduced us and then stood back with his arms crossed and a delighted expression on his face. Jones has a chunky build and a graveled voice and probing eyes. He knew about my book on Al-Qaeda, The Looming Tower, although I didn't have the impression that he had read it or anything much on the subject. He ventured the opinion that American forces were sending assassination squads into Middle Eastern countries to take out the top guys in Al-Qaeda. I responded that a good source of mine, Jamal Khalifa, who was Osama bin Laden's brother-in-law, had been murdered in Madagascar, I believe by American Special Forces. At that point, I suppose we were in agreement. I found him pleasant and curious, playful in a way, and yet Jones' bizarre assertions about 9/11 were already shouldering their way into the popular culture. He claims credit for founding the 9/11 Truth Movement, which in its most robust version goes like this. The U.S. government, in league with Israel, knew that Al-Qaeda was going to strike America, but the terrorist group wasn't capable of pulling off such an ambitious plan by itself. To ensure the success of the attack, American operatives placed high explosives in the towers, which detonated after the plane struck, creating a controlled bombing to bring the buildings down. Moreover, the Pentagon wasn't actually struck by American Airlines Flight 77. It was hit by an American missile. As for the heroic actions of the passengers on the last of the hijacked planes, United Flight 93, who thwarted the attack on the White House, the truthers assert that the plane was either shot down by a U.S. military jet or secretly landed safely. All this was done to provide an excuse to invade Iraq and steal the oil.
But what about the people, well,
So there is something mesmerizing about Jones' ability to rant. He reminds me of televangelist Jimmy Swaggart, whom I once interviewed. Like Swaggart, Jones lives in a world of revelation, convincing himself of the truth of whatever comes out of his mouth. He may also be a performance artist, as Jones' lawyer recently claimed in a custody battle with his former wife. But that suggests he doesn't really believe what he's saying, and that he's only talking for effect. Rick later told me that about a week after 9/11, when he and Jones were walking to a screening of Waking Life, Jones admitted that the U.S. government wasn't actually responsible for 9/11. But they're going to use this for all kinds of horrible stuff. He was right about that, Rick observed, but that kind of insight isn't easily monetized.
Ooh,
That's quite a book, that.
Mm-hmm.
it's well written.
Yeah, very interesting.
I don't know if I'd like to meet the guy though.
God Save Texas. Wow.
Interesting.
Alex
Thank you.
Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And written by Lawrence Wright.
written by Lawrence Wright.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to something else. I have a really thick book here. It's called The Fall of Giants. Well, without the. Fall of Giants. This is the first in Ken Follett's Century Trilogy, and I believe that it's the book that your wife read almost completely on her birthday.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really thick, and it's really good. This is a historical fiction book about the events leading up to and during World War I. And it has stories from different families from Germany, from Wales, from England, all over the place that were involved in the First World War. And it has historical characters as well. Winston Churchill is one of the characters in this book. And it follows their stories through the battlefields, through the home front, all sorts of things. And it's really interesting and exciting, and it's hard to put down. And this is the first. There are two more that are just as thick, so I couldn't even hold them in my hands if I tried. But Ken Follett, Fall of Giants. And it's a very good book. I'm not going to read a passage because then we'd be here for a long, long time, but it's very good.
Alrighty. Well, I think I'm going to address the other two books that I brought with me. First of which is called Kicks: The Great American Story of Sneakers by Nicholas Smith. And on the cover, which is a very vibrant blue, you have in silhouette a bunch of boxes of sneakers and some sneakers. It's a very attractive cover. I like it. Anyway, as the title says, this is the story of America's relationship with the sneaker. The sneaker.
Oh, very nice.
Yes. In this tale, you have Charles Goodyear, the great rubber king of America, who was working tirelessly to improve his formulas to make them do what he needed them to do, for tires and for shoes and so on.
He wasn't tireless.
He wasn't tireless.
That was good.
But Chuck Taylor, he apparently started his sneaker business selling shoes out of the back of his car.
Taylor.
And now you see Chuck Taylors everywhere, including on my feet, and these are well used. But along with the narrative, you have a lot of nifty pictures to help you know exactly who the people are that this author is talking about. And it just talks about how the sneaker has gone from a shoe that was basically worn by the upper crust when they were playing croquet to a global economic phenomenon, a fashion phenomenon, a common part of every person's life. Even in third world countries, if someone has a shoe, a lot of times it's going to be a sneaker.
What did people wear before there were sneakers?
Dutch clogs. and then after the Dutch clogs, they had those those high button boots.
Button boots.
Yeah.
I thought they wore those like sandals with the leather straps all over.
Oh well, if you're gonna go all the way back to those the leather
Moccasins.
strappy sandals and the moccasins, see there are all kinds of shoes.
bark.
But
They wore bark.
They wore bark, tied them to their feet. So anyway, I think given all of the heavy things that we have offered here today, here's something a little lighter, a little breezier. The history of the sneaker. Also, I brought The Pope, Who Would Be King by David I. Kurtzer. He also authored The Pope and Mussolini. That's another book that this gentleman authored.
Is it the same Pope?
No, the Pope that was around for Mussolini was not the same Pope that they're talking about
That
here.
wanted to be the king.
The Pope that they're talking about here is Pope Pius IX. He was the Pope in the late 1840s when, all kinds of political unrest was going on. And basically, he was the last Pope that exerted, that had a lot of tangible, actual, real political power. The whole idea of ruling by divine right was kind of linked to the Pope, to the Church, and it was through the political unrest and the things that happened while Pope Pius IX was, where he was, that modern Europe emerged, because that whole idea of the rule by divine right kind of got overturned. In fact, reading from the blurb here, the wave of revolution that had swept through Europe now seemed poised to end the Pope's 1,000-year reign over the Papal States, if not the papacy itself. Disguising himself as a simple parish priest, Pius escaped through a back door. Climbing inside the Bavarian ambassador's carriage, he embarked on a journey into a fateful exile. And so Mr. Kurtzer basically talks about all of the different players involved in the unrest. Italy in the late 1840s was really looking to become a unified country. Previous to that, it had been a bunch of city-states, basically, with the Papal State being one of them. And the Pope basically ruled through the Church rather than through a unified government. And that not only went throughout Italy, but that extended into Austria with the Habsburg Empire. And basically all of these different monarchs and lesser rulers, they gained their power by their relationship to the Pope. That's why when Henry VIII did what he did, and with splitting off and becoming the Church of England, why that was such a big deal, splitting with the Pope, he had to really reassert his political authority, otherwise it would have evaporated as well. So this book is not only about the Pope who would be king, but this book is about how the Church's rule over the Western world was broken.
Interesting.
So, yeah, a couple of different, totally different stories. The history of sneakers and the history of, the Pope who would be king.
Great, thank you. That was
Sure.
interesting.
Before I talk about my next book, I want to talk about library programs.
Oh, great.
So summer reading has been amazing this year. I help a lot with the adult summer reading program, which we have had over 200 people sign up for.
That's a record.
Which is a record. We had a program last night where we made book journals. So we took just composition notebooks and Mod Podged covers. So this one here just has little pictures of books that had been cut out and then glued on here and then Mod Podged. Have you ever Mod Podged?
I have, actually. We
Okay,
did a library
good.
activity where we Mod Podged.
All right.
Yes.
So this is my other one. This is my actual book journal because I'm keeping track for my 50/50 Book Quest books. And I have taken what I've written down and printed out.
Great.
So I can,
Look at this.
I know, I go a little overboard here. But I also write down the other categories that it can fit. So when somebody's asking for a suggestion, I can say, well, I put it under this category, but these are the other things that it can go under. So we are halfway through the year. So if you're doing the 50/50 Book Quest, you were given this little reading log with all the categories on it to keep track of your books. Mine are in pencil because I have moved a few of them around. But when they're finalized, they get put in here. So I've already had people finish.
Wow.
So it is not too late to sign up for this. If you think you can get about 2 books a week done, you can still have time to finish this. Okay? So speaking of that, one of the categories that people have had a hard time with is book by an Idaho author. So I just thought I'd share with you this amazing book I have come across. This is called Shakespeare's True Love.
Oh, nice.
And this is actually a Pocatello author, Helen Burton. She actually volunteers at our library. and I loved this book. So this takes a different view on William Shakespeare. Lots of times when you think of William Shakespeare, you think of, I'm sorry to say this, drunk guy in the gutter. Okay, lots of times
I don't think
I
of a
don't
drunk
think
guy in a
of a
gutter.
drunk guy.
that is the perspective that people are getting, is the guy who went and spent all of his time in the pub, and then he'd also
But
write
he
some
wrote
plays.
some beautiful,
He did.
amazing plays.
So this takes the opposite of that. It's a historical fiction. It is based on like true dates and stuff. So this takes his, how he met his wife. Her name is Anne Hathaway. They had 3 children together, and how her love and support just really gave him the strength to follow his dream. And totally opposite perspective than other stories I have heard historians come up with about what his life could have been. There was never any proof that he was with any other woman besides his wife, and our author stuck to that, even though that's what a lot of historians say happened, because she stayed in Stratford while he went to London and traveled, because he also performed his plays. Who knows? It's not really documented, but I loved how she took this. And I didn't know he was a father of twins. And being a mother of twins, I loved seeing how it was the perspective that was taken on how he includes so many sets of twins in his plays, because he had twins that he could base some of those ideas on.
Were they a boy and a girl?
They are a boy and a girl.
And were they identical?
You have no idea how many times I get that question.
Well, that's
No.
impossible, so.
I get that question a lot, actually.
Really?
No, they're not identical.
So.
Okay, moving on. This is a great book. You guys should read it. Pocatello author, so you can mark that off on your Idaho author category. If you've already got that category, historical fiction.
Wonderful.
So,
Tell us something funny, John.
Well, I guess that kind of limits me to one choice because none of the rest of his stuff is very funny, except for this one. Okay, so I have fond memories of my parents going and visiting friends of theirs, and I would need to use the bathroom at some point during the visit and go into their bathroom and find a magazine rack with lots of New Yorkers in them. And being a child of my age then, which was probably about 11 or 12, I didn't bother reading the articles. I looked at the cartoons. So I found out that there was a book published, some years ago that had every single New Yorker cartoon ever drawn up to that time. And I thought that would be something really good for the library. So I requested it, and it came, and I've gone through it and picked out some cartoons in it that I like. So this one is Happy 40th. I'll take the muscle tone in your upper arms, the girlish figure, and the rest of it can stay for now. So it's death.
Yeah.
And so I mean, there's like certain themes that the cartoons that they've developed over the years, like the guy crawling through the desert who's dying of thirst.
Yeah.
Well, there's one famous one that I really like. It shows a guy crawling through the desert in the foreground, and he's saying water. And in the background, there's a woman crawling through the desert in the other direction, and she's saying, moisturizer.
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah. So these are like, I got a real kick out of these. There was one, there was one that showed a couple of praying mantises, and one praying mantis his head is gone. And the other praying mantis says, You slept with her, didn't you?
Oh dear.
So, oh, and oh gosh, yeah. So the desert one is one theme that they do a lot, and then the
Couple
desert
sitting on the
island.
couch.
Yeah, there's the desert island, and then the man on the psychiatrist's couch, or animal. You know, you can have all kinds of things on the psychiatrist's couch. And I would love to see books that were theme driven, where they would just collect all of the ones on one theme in a single book. Although that might get to be a little too much. But as big as this book is, it isn't everything that they've ever published. So they included
Ooh,
a CD.
a CD with everything?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Everything during the period
during that
covered
time.
by this book, yeah, which is from the very beginning till the early 2000s, I guess. So,
Wow.
so the New Yorker cartoons, put it in your bathroom. Or check this one out and don't put this one in your bathroom. But,
Yeah.
but get one of your own,
No.
put that in your bathroom. But check this one out and just read it in a very safe, non-moist place.
Oh, that sounds good. That's good.
Because it's very expensive and we don't want to order another one.
Right.
Yes. Oh, I like that. Thank you. Now, one of the 50/50 book challenge categories is a book with a date in the title. And so I chose Dog Friday. This book has one of the funniest scenes I've ever read in all of literature. This little boy is named Robin, and he is afraid of dogs because he had, in the first pages of the book, a terrible accident where he was bitten and had to have stitches, and so he was scared of dogs. But his mother runs a bed and breakfast on the coast of England, and they have a great big old house, and half of it is the bed and breakfast. The other half they've rented out to another family. And the bed and breakfast isn't doing so well because, well, it's rainy and cold, and it's not really a destination place. So the kids in the house next door feel sorry for Robin and his mom because they don't have a lot of money. And it's hard because the mom is a widow, and of course then Robin doesn't have his dad, and so the family next door go together on an advertisement for the bed and breakfast. And I just need to read that part if I can find it. Nope. I think I saw it earlier. They gather together all of their money, and they have some birthday money, and so they make up an advertisement, and it's for this bed and breakfast, and it says, "Bed and breakfasters wanted. Good food and ghosts at Porridge Hall. Hot and cold water. No television. Garden instead. Well-trained dogs and ordinary children welcome. Telephone number, and the owner quite friendly." That's because as they went through it, they said, hot and cold and television. They say things like in other bed and breakfast advertisements, hot and cold what? Water, of course. How about well-trained dogs and children welcome, suggested one of them. That sounds like the children have to be well-trained as well as the dogs. Well-trained dogs and ordinary children? That's better. Then the telephone number, and they always say something like friendly staff, or warm welcome, or family owners. Mrs. Brogan is nice, but she's not always friendly. She can be very fierce. Well, we'll put quite friendly in then. She is that. And so pretty soon they start to get telephone calls saying, "Oh, we have some ordinary children. Will we be welcome?" And pretty soon, their bed and breakfast starts to take off. And one day, Robin and one of the little children from the house next door are the only ones home because Mrs. Brogan, his mother, has been watching the other children and has to take them into the big city for some stitches because there was blood and things happened. And unexpectedly, some bed and breakfasters turn up, and oh, it's a great story. So it's short, it's fun. Robin does overcome his fear of dogs, and it's just a charming, charming book. And it has a day in the title.
Perfect.
Well,
He does.
I think on that note, we can end. But come to the library. Come and tell us what you've been reading for your 50/50 book challenge. Tell us what your favorite New Yorker cartoons are, perhaps. And come and show us your sneakers. Very good. All right, but thank you. Come and join us, and we will see you again next time. Goodbye.